Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So this part should be a lot better than the last part. So let's talk about why trickle-down economics doesn't work. Let's talk about some concepts here. I wrote a few things down here. Okay, so moral intensity improves judgment. And the economy is in bad shape because of bad judgment, to make a long story short. Whether it's the greed of the rich, where they don't understand money isn't everything and they make a complete fool of themselves and they look dumber than ever. Whether it's substance abuse and the cultures that lead into it. Whether it's romantic injustice, right? Females make bad dating calls and guys tend to be hit harder than females, generally speaking. They have a higher sex drive. They insist on dating more than females do, who kind of play it cool, for the most part. Okay, and it has this catastrophic effect. Bad judgment, bad judgment, bad judgment. All of a sudden you have this horrible economy and people are suffering to the extreme. One thing I would say is that the fear of being without true love is the beginning of the wisdom, right? Why? Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So if people aren't afraid of being without true love to the point where they move masterfully, they're not wise. And wisdom and good judgment go hand in hand. Wisdom, insight, sense, good judgment. These things are key. Part of the reason why people won't rally to me is because they're afraid. Because they're not smart enough to not be a coward. That's why the ancient Egyptians, as the story goes, would say that the heart is the seat of intelligence. Now, obviously, they didn't all agree on everything. But so many of them agreed on that became this kind of idea that was put out there. You see, the wise man does not let money or the economy make him a modern-day slave. The wise man insists on what's right. And if this country was built on that kind of thinking, it would be much better off. So, why exactly does trickle-down economics, aka control freak oligarch economics, aka sexual sadist economics, aka sucker economics, why does it fail? Why does trickle-down economics fail? Why does supply-side economics fail? They're all the same thing. Well, number one, there is not as much tax revenue. A lot of people don't appreciate this. We could have brought in trillions of dollars in tax revenue and expanded the economy even more than it has expanded over the years. So we lost out on that tax revenue, which meant that the interest payment on the debt, how much we pay to service the debt every year increased. So we didn't just lose out on trillions of dollars, but we lost out on more money than that because it translated into bigger interest payments on the debt. Point number two, the stage was set, right? The stage gets set for the rich to avoid paying taxes even more. So when they already set up a system where they avoid paying taxes to a certain degree, it sets the stage for them to create tax loopholes for themselves to avoid paying taxes even more. So we miss out on even more tax revenue. Point number three, smarter people are kept from starting successful businesses. So a lot of intellectual capital is wasted every year, a lot of human resources. People like me, for example, very intelligent people, if they were put in strategic positions, they could really help the economy really expand. We could have twice as big of an economy right now, for example. But smarter people are kept from starting successful businesses because of old money groups, corporate groups, social clubs, because of Freemasons. Various groups come together and they insist that people like them advance. You see a lot of these people who aren't so smart in college frats, for example. They practice nepotism and favoritism, and they hire each other for jobs and to make sure that they get the position. And because of that, smarter people are kept from starting successful businesses and drastically expanding the economy. Point number four, tax revenue can be split between startup companies and social programs. So what does it mean for us not to get more tax revenue? It's not like, hey, we just give the poor more food and that's that. No. We can split that tax revenue between the most viable startup companies and social programs. Okay? So what we're not doing is part of why trickle-down economics fails. And we've had a trickle-down economic system the whole time. Okay? With America's human resources, we should be doing a lot better than we are. The whole planet should be doing a lot better than it is. It's not enough to say, hey, while rich people sabotage every country on the planet, look how much we've accomplished. We have to ask ourselves, how much more could we have accomplished? We could have a surplus instead of a debt. So their arguments don't make sense. For all intents and purposes, they're talking crazy. And they're trying to dumb everyone down to the point where they might think that they're actually talking sense. And that goes back to moral intensity. Moral intensity increases sound judgment. The absence of moral intensity creates bad judgment. And they've done studies. It's not just something that I've noticed or everyone's noticed or something that's logical and not necessarily causal. It's something that they have done studies on and they've verified. In fact, you should look it up. I've posted one of the studies in the past before. Okay. Point number 5. Trickle-down economics creates a lot of substance abuse. It creates the ghetto cultures, the trailer park cultures, and the spillover from these cultures as some of these people become entertainers and influence other people to be in their cultures. Okay, it creates the atheist culture with no strong moral basis. The fact that they've said that about 10% of America is atheists, and that kind of coincides with the decline of the attempt for lots of people to be moral. So America was never really a moral nation. But since about the 80s, people started trying a little bit harder than they did before. You know, after the segregation ended around the 60s in that form, you had the various, civil rights acts. Martin Luther King was assassinated. People started feeling bad. They started pushing a little bit more toward morality in the 70s and 80s. And it looked like that racism was starting to be defeated. Well, as the rise of atheism and certain LGBT movements, with the rise of the MAGA movement, with the rise of various movements, token minority movements and corporate-sponsored movements to create straw men and to suppress uncontrolled movements, we saw definitively that racism resurged and stupidity resurged in a way that's unprecedented. Okay? And you see that poverty and hopelessness also create substance abuse. So when you have a trickle-down system, right, instead of strong social programs, like remember Reagan, right? I talked about in the last video or the video before, that Reagan, cut funding to social programs as part of his trickle-down plan. He thought he needed to save money and to cut money from social programs and to give tax breaks to the rich. And it didn't work. It failed miserably. Immediately there was a recession, and the only reason why we climbed out of the recession was because the IT boom and the money he spent on the defense industry expanded the economy. But so what? It was more important to spend money on social programs than have an arms race with Russia. Okay, so it bankrupted Russia. Well, they eventually bounced back from that anyway. It was a waste of time. Okay. And wasted time and money and energy and human resources. Poor diplomacy is part of trickle-down economics. These guys tend to be the warmonger crowds, and they tend to rock the boat and clash with people. Yes, Democratic presidents do the same thing. But who brought us into Iraq and Afghanistan? Probably the most expensive war in American history. Trillions of dollars are spent. And again, there's a domino effect from that. What were we spending money on and what weren't we? Okay. Keep in mind that there's somewhere between $530 billion and over $700 billion spent on substance abuse. Substance abuse causes that financial burden on the system. Okay? We could cut that down significantly with the proper social programs, with rehabs, with a change of culture, Why are certain cultures so popular? Right, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. People say they built that city on rock and roll. What would have happened if we built the city on morality and moral rap and logical rap? And maybe logical rock, if such a thing could exist, with an emphasis on focus instead of being scatterbrained, mind you. If we built the city on moral cultures instead of on sexual sadism and control freak thinking and behind the scenes manipulation. Trickle-down economics is a package deal. The motive that goes into insisting on the system goes into the other things that come with it, the societal ills that come with it, the lost opportunities, the poverty, the hopelessness, the substance abuse, the various problems that come with it. For example, my point number 6 is that deregulating big business led to big pharma's price gouging, etc. Okay, and the off-label marketing that we see in psychiatry, where all these people are spending money on psych meds instead of spending money on affordable housing and farming programs. Psych meds they don't need, mind you. It's a package deal. For example, when you look at Nazi Germany, okay, what kind of system they had and why? Well, their economy wasn't doing that bad for a while, but then it tanked because the philosophy that created the economic expression was faulty and self-destructive. If they were going to end up being invaded and, the Berlin Wall and all this stuff was going to happen anyway, at least it should have been for morality's sake. So they could say, hey, we did that for a good reason. And we carried our cross, but they can't say that. So their economy eventually crashed big time, and they had to pay reparations for the war and all this. There was the Nuremberg trials, all kinds of bad things happened to them. Okay, because the underlying motive was off. It was evil, was stupid, what have you. And so it is with trickle-down economics. That's why I call it control freak oligarch economics. Nothing good comes from being a rich oppressor. If you look back at life and all you can say for yourself is you have lots of blood money, that is a miserable existence. You don't have inner joy, inner happiness. You're some kind of giddy, filthy worm swimming in blood money. An utter disgrace. In fact, that's why they made it so that there's a saying called embrace the disgrace. Because business is disgraceful. They make a killing. People die. And for what? For some arrogant worm to make an immature face like a frat boy at a party? So they can get a fair weather slut? Do I really have to explain to people why a woman of true worth is greater than some fair weather slut? Are you that far out of touch with your humanity? Trickle-down economics is insane economics. It's mass rape, mass murder economics. It is Roman Colosseum economics. It is sick, sick, sick. Point number 7. Cults prey on people, and there are psyops. That's part of the package deal. Now, some of you say, well, here we go again. Oh, really? So what is NXIVM, or Jonestown, or the celebrity cults, or Branch Davidians, Heaven's Gate, New Age cults, Christian cults? You think there's no cults manipulating people? And depending on how you define a cult, religions can be seen as cults. There's sexual abuse. And on top of that, cults that are bad, mind you, whether or not there's cults that are good, there's sexual abuse, there's mismanagement of money. There's all kinds of problems that we see. They're not doing a good job, socially speaking, spiritually speaking, financially speaking. They aren't doing a good job of helping society. Just because people do a little good doesn't mean they're doing a good job. Look at homelessness in California. People are getting housed. They're doing a little good, but they're not doing a good job overall. Okay. So again, you have to consider the motives, and you have to consider the package deal that comes with trickle-down economics. Look at the motive, the formula, the model, and the output. And again, the London School of Economics did a study of 18 or 19 places over long periods of time, and they found that trickle-down economics doesn't work. The money doesn't trickle down. Their main model, Reagan, okay, failed. Again, the key phrase is trickle down. Trickle down. It didn't trickle down. It didn't work. Making your oppressor richer while you get poorer is not a good idea. That's not what it means for money to trickle down. And on top of this, I can give you a model or part of a model right now that is vastly superior. So let me go over my 7-point war on poverty plan really quickly here. Okay, the first point is wealth taxes. For the first year, it'll be $220 billion in wealth taxes. After that, $100 billion a year. And the main goals are housing the homeless and a massive farming program. Point number 2, vice taxes. Okay, 5% on alcohol, cannabis, cigarettes, what have you. 1% on pet food. So vice taxes, luxury taxes, junk food taxes. We bring in about $36 billion a year, but it's probably better that we bring in $50 billion. Well, we'll go with the $36 billion number for now. And that would be $4 to $9 billion a year, depending on how they slice it, for building rehabs in California. Point number 3 is a $5 a month tax, which would bring in about $8 billion a year, which we would put toward building more affordable housing. We have to make very minor, small-term, expenditures, short-term expenditures for long-term gain. Point number 4, the affordable housing plan. Okay, once we house all the homeless, we immediately start building a lot more affordable housing. $80 to $100 billion a year for that. And preferably the government should also drop another $300 to $500 billion and just add it to the debt to build affordable housing, because this is a huge part of repairing the economy. There needs to be millions and millions of affordable housing units, and we can't build them fast enough. When we consider how fast we need to build them, we consider the human cost and the economic consequences of not building these housing buildings and tiny home units, what have you, fast enough. Okay, it's clear that they need to spend hundreds of billions of dollars building affordable housing. They should spend maybe $1.5 to $2 trillion in the next 10 years building affordable housing. It's that serious. Point number 5. We need a partial restructuring of the school system so that people who drop out of school can have programs where they take a lot less classes, have a lot less homework. It's a lot easier for them, a lot more enjoyable, and they go from that to jobs. So we can get a lot of people off of welfare, what have you, and expand the economy, what have you. And we also have to consider how robots are going to factor in a way that is logical and prudent, what have you. So point number 6, we need to spend $10 to $20 billion more on law enforcement every year, because crime and poverty go hand in hand, and crime has a domino effect which worsens poverty. Point number 7, we need to consider $10 billion a year for farming programs abroad. And I also have a global farming plan, okay, where we spend from $90 billion to $180 billion a year, and all in other wealth taxes, mind you. The rich spending that money, okay, for a global farming program, and other developed nations join us. Now, a lot of you don't understand why that's so important. A moral economy creates a very strong moral state. If we lead the charge to be moral in a way that's fair and square, fair and just and right. I don't speak in codes. I'm not talking about square and compass or something, but fair and just and right. This country would then transform to be what is actually the greatest country in the world, instead of one of the most guilty countries in the world that just throws away tons of money, embraces the ego of the rich, while the rich tell the poor to destroy their ego and to be their slaves and to be their sex slaves, what have you. Thank you.